Disclaimer, I just want to say this is a map game and this is not to be taken seriously, so YouTube staff, thank you for understanding that this is just for entertaining purposes, please don't ban me. Previously on Kaiserreich, 3/4 years of fighting in the east. After the fall of the last major Russian stronghold, they were swiftly defeated. Now it was time to divide the spoils of war. So, after defeating the Russian hordes, there was still a war raging on in the west. But before we could help out Germany, we had to contend with enemies in the north. Finland declared war for some reason, so we had to put them down. At the same time as this was happening, Munich had fallen. This triggered the Austrians to finally intervene in the Second Weltkrieg, as the French were cutting deeper into Germany. Meanwhile, the Baltische Landswehr continued the advance in the north to deal with the Swedes. But just as Austria joined the war, hoping to change the tide of the war, the Serbians and Romanians declared a surprise attack, bogging down any reinforcements in the Western Front. So to the Balkans we went and cleared the issue that was holding many Austrian troops from helping Germany, but at that point it was too late, as the Communist troops continued their advance into Berlin, and soon the great German capital was lost. With nothing left, the German government officially surrendered. Now we were alone, as the entire faction was disbanded. Even then, there was no time to waste. As such, we needed to contact the Austrians if we had any hope of winning or even surviving this war. But hey, since we are finally independent, we can create a puppet government in Finland that will grant us some much needed manpower. Just because the Heimat was lost, that did not mean that we would give up. With the help of the Austrian alliance, we made headway into eastern Germany, but not before we dealt with the Belarusian traitors who defected to the Syndicalist side. As we returned to the Western Front, our mechanized and armored troops reached the Oder River and encircled some Syndicalist troops in the process. To win this war, we need to kill the Syndicalists by 1,000 cut death, just like we handled the Russians years ago. And just like how the Russians were defeated, so too the Syndicalists would share the same fate. This war turned into a scenario where it was East versus West. As that pocket was cleaned up, it was time to formally cross the Oder River, and just like before, the Spearhead managed to cut off troops from their supply lines, and we were one step closer to retaking the great city of Berlin. Berlin and our Germanic brethren awaited us. As such, the offensive to reclaim the great city that once dominated parts of the world was now in full effect. Tanks had no trouble cutting through the front lines, and before we knew it, we were at Berlin. But just because this great symbolic city was liberated, that does not mean that the Syndicalist beast has been tamed, nor that the rest of Germany is safe. So, for that, we shall strike north to secure the Baltic Sea, making sure the naval invasions by the Red Dogs are harder to be launched. With the port of Hamburg now in control, we were free to continue our push into the other German regions, such as Saxony, as the front looks weaker as the time goes for the Syndicalists. Now that Saxony was secured, the next stop was Hanover, as that would open us the possibility to retake southern Germany as well as threaten the Benelux, the last line of defense before France itself. As our troops crossed the Rhine, a new opportunity presented itself, where if done correctly we could cut off the entire remaining Syndicalist troops in Germany, relinking with the Austrians to the south, and with the possibility of putting the final nail in the coffin for those socialist barbarians. The pocket was secured. The Austrian and their allies troops moved in to secure that pocket so it was not reopened. But this caused for the rest of the front to be pushed back yet again to Hanover, so this time instead of focusing on the Rhine, we shall redirect our attention to the lowlands to have a better grip over the northern part of the front. But as things quickly stalemated, we saw another opportunity, this time in Italy. So, just like Winston Churchill once said, we must strike the weak/soft underbelly of Europe to keep the pressure on the communist forces, giving them no breaks until they lay down their arms. As Italy was severely underdefended, thanks to the lack of troops needed to cover the entire front made up of the combined forces of our coalition, Italy stood no chance and surrendered after the fall of Naples. But even more surprisingly, and I would say excellent news, came in as the communist capital was lost, not to our eastern coalition, but to the Canadians who made a comeback after all. Things were finally starting to look to our favor. The communists could no longer sustain their heavy losses. Motivated by this, not only were the resilient pockets destroyed, but it was also time that we crossed for the second time the Rhine and liberated the rest of Germany. By this time also, the technological advancements of our scientists were so ahead that state-of-the-art modern tanks would soon be available to combat the expected heavy resistance in France proper. As our troops continued to make their way over the Rhine, they even managed to retake Alsace-Lorraine and threaten French territory by German troops, something that had not happened ever since the start of the war, 7 years ago. It was clear that the Commune's days were numbered. As such, final offensives would take place to retake Belgium, link up with the Canadian troops, and finally put an end to the biggest threat to the European continent it has ever seen. But sad news came in as our great leader finally passed away in his sleep. He will be remembered as a great leader and as a unifying figure for all Germans. But with his death, it also provides us an opportunity to take control of the nation officially and rebuild Germany into the Baltic Brotherhood's image. The last city finally fell to our troops, and soon the long-awaited announcement was made public. The Commune of France had finally surrendered under the pressure of our combined troops. Now the only place with Syndicalist influence was the British Isles, so it was time we crossed the English Channel to help out the Canadian troops to put an end to the Red Menace itself. The British troops, exhausted by the war, possessed Little resistance, and soon this dread war was finally over. Now it was time to pick up the pieces, rebuild anew, as we claim the mantle of our German brethren that we liberated from the French and Socialist boot. We can finally proclaim a new Germany, a better Germany. From the ashes of the old Kaiserreich, a new Germany stands resurgent in an unknown world, ready to reclaim its place in the world stage. But that's for another time. And that was the end of the video for today. There is just one final part to this campaign to be released. But until that video releases, I really hope you enjoyed this second part, where I had to cut down a war that lasted over 8 years. It lasted way longer than I originally expected, but nonetheless, if you want to see similar type of content in the future, remember to subscribe, as this helps out the channel. This was the Factus Expert. You are dismissed, soldier.